All right, now we will get started on this committee of the whole meeting. There is an addition to the agenda for an in-camera item, and that will be 3C. But other than that, are there any other additions? All righty, so let's move on to committee reports. We'll start with Councillor Lonsdale.
Thank you. My diversity and inclusiveness committee meeting got moved to September, so we didn't have that meeting, but in a involved sort of way, the session with Brad Rabbit was I found very enlightening, and was a great way to spend an hour and a half just learning about another culture. And then I guess just beyond that was a couple of meetings with the IRC this morning.
Well, thank you, Dave. I'm sitting on the committee for Wetaskiwin Camrose, and we haven't had a meeting yet, so nothing to report.
And regarding WOLA, we never had no meetings for the summer, but I'm dealing with a few issues of complaints. Only other thing was the IRC or ICF and its ongoing struggle and trying to get things organized before we have a new council, or at least things dotted down and starting a procedure on it. That's about it.
We hosted Municipal Leaders Caucus in Wetaskiwin. Thanks to the staff that came there for that. I think it was a really good event, having a drum group there to start things off in the morning, and then two chiefs speaking on their personal experience in terms of residential school, what's happening now, the ground penetrating radar that's going on in Ermineskin. It was pretty powerful to have them speak to that. It was on the Ryan Jesperson podcast show talking about inclusivity, diversity and inclusivity. As Councillor Hilgartner talked about our IRC with our ICS with the county, a couple of hub task force meetings, and probably lots of stuff that I'm forgetting, but it's been a busy month.
The library board has not met since we passed the change in direction that we've gone with the agreement with the library. In regards to the CEC, Community Engagement Committee, and the winter warm-up, it is a go. It will be like it was 2 years ago down at the drill hall. I don't have the date in front of me, but it is near the end of November, same time as the Santa Claus parade. At this point, I publicly would like to wish Kirsten Young, who will be leaving the organization. She is an absolute stellar member of our community who's going to be missed. She has taken on so many responsibilities, and I can't thank her enough for her hard work and dedication to the CEC.
As Tyler mentioned, it's been a busy month. I attended a Guiding Coalition Homeless meeting, the Chamber Hub meeting. I had a meeting with Paul Edgington with regarding the establishment of an art committee and in terms of reference. Attended the Wetaskiwin Arts and Music Festival. Unfortunately, attended a funeral of one of our volunteer firefighters, Tyrone McDonald. Attended FCSS Sharing Circle meeting. I had a meeting with the local businessmen with regard to the topic of CORE safety program, and that's what sparked some of the questions I put out. I had a meeting on Friday with 2 Rock Soup volunteers, and subsequently did a tour of Rock Soup on Saturday morning. And even now, even since Saturday morning, the Rock Soup site has changed considerably in size and numbers. And then I attended the Pride event at Jubilee Park on Saturday as well. That's all I have to report. Thank you.
Yeah, so as Counselor Billingsley said, the CEC has been great right now. They've been planning so many different things that we're going to be doing for the winter warm up, and it's pretty exciting that we can start planning some Christmas events as of right now. And so hopefully that doesn't change in the near future. Also attended the Arts and Music Festival, which was actually a really, really good time. Had a lot of fun there. Also attended a couple of funerals this past month as well. One was for Tyrone McDonald and the other was for Darren Max, and both were really, really lovely services and really well attended. Went to the Indigenous cultural training that we went to on Thursday about a week and a half ago, and that was really interesting. Took a lot of notes during that and I learned a lot. And on top of that, went to Pride in the Park on Saturday, and yeah, that's about it. So moving on to new and unfinished business, we're going to go to the August 2021 grants update.
So in front of you, you have the 2021 grants update. So again, I'm just going to speak as per usual to the grants that have the updates, not necessarily all of the ones in the list. So for new 2021 approved grants, the city was approved for the community airport stream of the Strategic Transportation Infrastructure Program. And this was offered through Alberta Transportation for $1.6 million. And that's for runway apron 1 and taxi B overlays. And the total project cost is $2.1 million with the grant covering 75%. And then there are no new updates for unapproved grants. Again, similar to last time, the outstanding 2020 grant is the Municipal Asset Management Program. Now, this application is currently in the second stage of review, so we hope to hear back pretty soon. And again, that's for $34,400. For grants under investigation, the Recreation Energy Conservation Program, as well as the Municipal Solar Program, the Community Buildings Retrofit Program, and the Green Inclusive Community Buildings are all still under investigation. The city did not move forward. Well, the city and FCSS did not move forward with an application to the Canada Healthy Community Initiative, and that was offered through Community Foundations of Canada. And then you'll see the last two here, they were put under investigation at the time that I drafted this, but we did end up applying. So the Supporting Psychological Health in First Responders grant, we applied for $36,900 and that's for PTSI training for both first responders and their supports at home. We were not approved in 2021, but we have revamped the application to provide increased statistical data and experiences to strengthen the necessity of the program in our community. So hopefully we will be successful this time. And then the Canada Community Revitalization Grant, this was offered through the federal government. We did submit an application for a total project cost of $382,500. This was for the By the Lake Park Trail rehabilitation, the Peace Hill Park Stairs projects, and then also actually the tennis court rehabilitation was eligible as well, so we applied for that. So the total grant that we applied for was $286,875. And then the city's portion of that would be $95,625. And then for reporting, there actually is a bit of an update. So previously, if you remember, we were outstanding for gas tax fund SFEs from 2016 onwards. We had to re-reconcile those. I'm happy to report our two outstanding projects were approved and our SFEs from 2016 to 2020 have been submitted. The only SFE that hasn't been certified is the 2020 SFE, which none of them have at this point. And then just a pointed note, they renamed the gas tax fund to the Canada Community Building Fund. So in the future, that's what I'll refer to it as. Any questions? Yes.
Councillor Branco.
Thank you through the chair to, actually the question is going to be to Sue. The airport grant of $1.6 million. Is that going ahead this year? Is it too late for a tendering system to proceed that we may, because of that late in the year? Is the price is going to go up or down, or do we wait till spring for a better pricing?
Through the chair to Councillor Bronco, the project is proceeding this year.
Okay, do we have are the tenders out or?
The tenders are out. They've been awarded and construction is due to start in the coming weeks.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Awesome. I do have a question for you, Jody.
Okay.
So I did notice that under the, because I'm always going to ask about the tree planting grant for Fortis Alberta, I noticed that only $1,200 of the $2,500 were applied. Can you tell me why?
That's actually, sorry, that's a typo,
Okay.
which I realized after I submitted this. So we actually applied for the 2,500 and we were approved for the 1,200. So I'll make sure that that's corrected for the next update.
Awesome. Thank you. And Councillor Branco.
Thank you. Gabe, the chair through engineering department, I guess. By the Lake Park, we're applying for grants for reconstructing of the asphalt path or a new path.
Through the chair to Councillor Bronco, this would be a reconstruction of the existing path.
That path's only about 5 or 6 years old, correct? Are we changing anything differently on that path? Because it seems it's fallen apart because of the roots and everything. Are we overlaying it? Are we ripping it up, cutting the trees, or?
It is a full reconstruction. We're not just going to overlay it.
And we're not doing it ourselves to save money like last time?
I didn't hear that.
Last time we did all the base work and everything, and we just had somebody to come in. So this year, the base is going to be done by others other than ourselves.
Through the chair to Councillor Bronco, I believe that is how Public Works has been handling the trail project. We do the base and then we get someone in to do the asphalt.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Anyone else? Okay. Now, thank you, Jody.
Thank you.
Moving on to the CAO update.
Thank you. The first piece, so there were several questions that have come out since the last council meeting. And the first piece that I wanted to speak about was core. We had handouts to everybody. I apologize for a lot of the handouts not being ready for the when we published the agenda, but there was some information that we were waiting for. Our health and safety person, Julia, will be joining us shortly in case you have other questions. So the question had come through from Councillor Nielsen about core. And I know in previous conversations with Councillor Hillgartner and Councillor Bronco wondering why we require core. So Julie and I got together and started to put together a bit of a, this is why we do it. And then specific to the questions that were asked in Councillor Nielsen's email, we provided answers to those. I want to start by saying administration is not, we're not married to any of these ideas with respect to safety. We do this to protect the organization. And if council wants us to do something different, obviously we would want to look at what the risks would be and then be able to report back to you on what changes you're proposing and what the risks are. And so I guess just generally from OH&S legislation, just letting everybody know that it's actually regulated through an act, and there are laws around occupational health and safety that we have to follow. So in the law states that someone has to be responsible for every worker. And if they call it, well, they consider anybody that has the authority to direct how someone else works is the one responsible for their health and safety. So if you're responsible for someone's health and safety, you need to be able to have a safety program in place that says, this is how you're going to act, and this is what you're going to do on our site, and this is what we're going to provide for you. So it would make sense that if every organization is responsible for the health and safety of their workers, that you put that responsibility on the person or the department that is best to oversee that. So in our organization, we have core. we are ultimately responsible for making sure that our staff are safe. Anybody that gives direction during the day to that person could be legally held liable in court and either fined or put in prison if something happens to the people in their charge. So when a contractor comes on, it would make sense that we don't have control over that because we're not the ones actually dictating what work that they do and how they do it. I put a little example in here, and Karen has the digital piece as well, so we'll make sure this is published so that the public can see it. I was involved in a case in the city of St. Albert with O'Hanlon Paving in 2013, and it was the end of the season, and we were in a really big hurry to get this overlay project done. We had a letter of commitment similar to what we have here in the city of Wetaskiwin, and that letter of commitment gets us through until the contracts are signed. In our contracts, we actually delegate prime contractor status with respect to occupational health and safety to the contractor. So they have to sign saying they accept prime. So in the meantime, before we get those contracts, we send out what's called a letter of commitment. And on the bottom of that letter of commitment is a simple statement that says, I print and sign your name from this company, do acknowledge and accept the role of prime contractor status with respect to health and safety. This particular incident, that's all that we had. The work started, the contracts weren't signed. A young worker was killed on the road project that day. The OH&S department had the site for 4 days. They had security there. There was a massive investigation. And the only reason we were not held responsible was because we had them sign that little piece of statement saying that we're not responsible for their safety. And a side note to all of this, when I was taking the OH&S program at the university, our law professor said to us 2 things that really stuck with me. It's not about the truth, it's about the proof. So everything has to be in writing. And the second one was, if there's a death in your organization, not only is it going to cost you your reputation, but it will cost you a minimum of $1 million to get through the investigation, the lawsuits, the court dates, everything that's going to ensue. So we take health and safety really seriously. And when we're looking at our contractors, the equipment they have is very dangerous. In this particular instance, it was only a half-ton truck that killed this young man. So that just kind of sets the tone for why we have CORE and why we make that someone else's responsibility. So in consultation with Julia, we took Councillor Nielsen's questions and provided some answers there. So how does requiring contractors to have CORE versus other health and safety protect the city? I think I've pretty much described how that protects the city. Number 2 was, are there other safety programs out there that would protect a municipality? So yes, they can have CCorps, which is just the small employer version of the bigger CORE, which is less burdensome to smaller companies, but still requires them to maintain the main elements of a CORE program, and it gets audited as well. And they could also go with ISO 45001 certification, which is also audited. I don't have experience with that, but I know Julia does. And so if that's something that council wants us to explore, we could look at that. Julia might have more information on how much that would cost a contractor, but it's another option for them. The third question was, do general contractors have to have CORE? Do sub-trades have to have CORE to work for the general? And does the general assume all risk? Usually one person has to be considered prime contractor. We have a thing called time and space. So there has to be a separation of time and space for there to be more than one prime. If multiple contractors are working in the same space and time, one of them has to be responsible for everybody. So the subcontractors may not necessarily need to have CORE. They're signing on or accepting responsibility with the bigger company. And there is no law that says you have to have CORE. There is law around protection of your workers, and CORE is just one of those ways that you can maintain that you have a safety program in place that will protect the workers. The next one was, do all municipalities require CORE? If not, what are these communities requiring in lieu of CORE? And again, technically, no, municipalities do not have to have CORE, but if we do wish to take advantage of the discount with WCB, then you do need to participate. And we get up to 20% through our partnership in injury reduction. And again, it's noted the ISO requirements could potentially be an option for us, but it would not be recognized through WCB. So we would not be getting that rebate if we went that route. Number 4 was, could core be a requirement based on the size or dollar value of a project? The requirement for any contractor to have their own core could indeed be dependent on the size of the project. However, those without core should agree to follow our safety policies and procedures, and must make sure that they're following the most stringent, obviously ours would be. So this also puts risk back on the organization. So again, we're not saying that we won't take that responsibility. If council wants us to take on the responsibility of the contractors, we would just potentially want to look at staffing to be able to do that, because it would take a lot of effort and someone would have to be on site every day checking with the contractors. So there is a way to get around that. And then the last question was, what is the cost to a small company getting core? So the small companies could go to CCorps, and the cost for, I think the audit itself is what is the major cost, is that $1,000 to $2,000. Oh no, I'm Juliet. Do you want to come to the mic and then you can tag team me on this whole thing?
When a small company goes to CCorps, the cost that they would actually have to pay out for a third-party person to go through the whole program is about $1,000 to $2,000 from start to finish. They submit all their documents, but the CCorps company that's auditing them doesn't charge them. It's just the contractor to do the program for them that's going to cost about $1,000 to $2,000, depending on how many people that they have.
So that is CCorps.
That's CCorps. It's the same as core, but it's just for a much smaller company, up to 10 people.
It's actually below 12 people. So what is the cost? Because not only, you're right, I'm sorry, you're right, but there is a pamphlet, you have to fill a whole bunch of paper. What is the cost? Because you have to go to courses to get a CCorps.
For CCorps, there's actually 3 courses that you have to do, or you have to have a safety officer that's associated with your company that has those 3. Those courses themselves are only a couple of $100 each to do those 3. But yeah, there's a paperwork involved. But if you have a contractor doing all the paperwork, they would do all that paperwork for the cost of about $1,000 to $2,000, depending on who you go to. All you have to do then is keep up that documentation. So you have to make sure that you have your safety meetings minuted and all that sort of stuff. So you're just keeping up the paperwork yourself.
Councillor Nielsen?
If it was decided that the city drop core, what would administration recommend? And you tied this back to a maximum 20% rebate of 34,000. But if we drop the core requirement, it says here we would need all contractors to follow our procedures and protocols and then be managed by our staff. And they would have to be on site all the time?
They would have to be on site the majority of the time. I mean, it goes back to, they need to have the confidence, or Julia would have to have the confidence that the person out there monitoring them is not putting us at risk. So we need to make sure they're following their safety procedures. I would say daily, because hazards change daily, that someone from the city staff would need to be there. We could tap in with the project managers, but that would take extra training for them as well. When Julie and I talked about this, we kind of said, okay, if council does decide to go this way, the ideal solution would be hire a person that is completely dedicated to contractor core. And then that person's whole job is going to be making sure that their safety manuals, that everybody has proper orientation and training, that the contractors know what's expected out there, and then we would be taking on the responsibility. So if that contractor had an incident, it's our incident.
But would we still be covered under WCB if we had our own person overseeing the project that has core?
Yeah, there's two elements you're talking about here. One is if we as the city of Wetaskiwin dropped core, and one if the contractors dropped core. That's 2 different scenarios. So if we keep our core, we continue to have our rebate under Partnership for Injury Reduction, the PIR program, and that's your $10,000-$20,000 reduction to us. The other one is if we have our contractors drop in core, in which case we would then be responsible for them. We'd have extra cost in making sure that they are safe and following our health and safety program. So there's two different scenarios.
And if we supervised
Yeah,
and did not have core, would we have to have core if we were supervising?
you don't have to have core in
Okay.
any way, shape or form.
Okay, so then if we were supervising to ensure proper safety practices, then we would lose out on the WCB
Discount.
rebate as well.
Yes, yes, we would. But if we didn't have core and we took responsibility for a contractor who didn't have core and there was an incident, the defense that we would have going to court on that would be very hard to prove, because you'd have to have every single duck in a row and every single piece of paperwork, because they go through everything with a fine tooth comb, because you don't have core, which is an audited program. So it's only going to cost you a lot more money to defend yourself.
Okay, could I hear you? Madam Chair?
Sure.
Thank you. Do we as a city entity currently have companies do emergency workforce who do not have core?
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, we have. The process that we have been moving to in each area is to have pre-qualified contractors that do have core. So we are still in the process of cleaning up departments to make sure that everyone that comes in has core. We do have some processes. I haven't had a chance to talk to Julie about this, for instance, like snow clearing, where our staff are monitoring that. And that was not actually sanctioned by anybody other than the department. So we're going through and reviewing that right now.
Okay, and then my last question would be, obviously this issue comes about by local businesses feeling left out of the bid process in contract work in town, because to my knowledge, most or many do not have core. And I know, Sue, you've talked about helping different companies get core. So I'm looking, I guess for me, I'm looking for a way to bridge this, if there's an appetite on the part of businesses to be competing for work, local business to compete for work within the city. What role could the city play, or maybe even, I guess maybe the question of council at a different time would be, or should the city be involved in, but what could the city do to help some of these local companies secure core so they could compete for and do work within the community in which they operate? Like can we run a training session here over 3 courses that we somehow facilitate, and then at the end of the day, if these people don't choose to participate, then we've done what we can to help them get there. But I don't know, I just would like to find a way to give opportunity for local businesses to compete for local work. And if the hang up is on core, what can we do to help expedite that?
Just for clarification, do you mean we do training to show them how they go get a core? Because to get core, you have to go through a certifying partner. We go through AMSA, who deals with municipalities. There's also the Construction Safety Association, which most of our contractors would go through. So we can't get them core.
No, I understand.
But we could, if council wanted us to, we could lay out what they have to do to get core. I think Julia highlighted it really well. It's a couple $1,000s and some training. The biggest commitment comes from staff time. So you have to have someone that can manage your safety program internally and update your documents and do all your meeting minutes and that sort of stuff. That's where the biggest cost comes into a contractor. And so maybe they just don't know that it's not that much money. I don't know.
And when you say to me, Sue, what are you thinking? I don't know what I'm thinking, to be honest with you. I just Yeah, I don't know. I just would like that. I'd like some local business to get an opportunity, and I guess it could be argued, well, that's on them. They know what the rules are to get core and then compete for local work. I was just looking for a workaround.
Mayor Ganem.
Just on Alberta Construction Safety Association, CCorps is limited to an employer with has no more than 10 employees, so it's not 12. Just so that there isn't a confusion between administration and council. And again, I agree that we have policy in place on core being a requirement. If council's looking for a workaround, then they amend that policy. I don't think that council or the city should be facilitating training for a business to be able to apply for work for the city. If this is our guideline, or if this is our benchmark, we're not getting in the way of somebody not being able to do business. Then the next thing we're going to be asked is if an insurance company has different qualifications or certifications that they need, would then the city be facilitating that kind of training so that they can continue doing business in the city? If we want to change anything, it's the policy. It's not facilitating the businesses to be able to go and get the training to do it.
Councillor Hillgartner.
Thank you. Through the chair to Sue, just to back up, I just want to clarify something. You say we do not have a safety person on City of Wetaskiwin?
Through the chair to Councillor Hillgartner, we do, Julia.
Okay, because to have core, you have to have basically full-time safety.
Yeah.
So then my question is when contractors come on site, do you actually go down and do an orientation?
No, that's actually based on the project manager to do. So there are documentation that has to be filled out for the project manager to go out and do site inspections.
Correct, because I know like even if you own the property, but let's say Fortis, you're doing some work around a power pole and Fortis owns that power pole, they take control because that's the most dangerous aspect, and that you have to go follow in accordance to their safety procedures. So I was just wondering, when we do a project, who is the main safety? Is it the contractor with core that comes in and does the safety procedure, or do you do the safety procedure?
If the contractor has their own core and their procedure is on par or more stringent than ours, then their procedure is the one that we would follow if it's more stringent than ours or on par with ours. So when they actually fill out the documentation with regards to the project itself, then we go through their documents to see what is actually noted in their documents, how they handle certain procedures, things like incidents and accidents, and just to make sure that it is either the same as or more stringent than how we would actually deal with that.
Yeah, basically our person there is tell them about the structure and
Yeah. And
exit
if there are
points
any
and-
incidents that happen with regards to the contractors, our procedures say that I have to be informed as well.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Billingsley.
This would be to see through the chair. If council decided not to require core versus core, given a liability waiver on this, is that a possibility that we could use a standard to different contractors for them to sign off that they are solely responsible as being the prime? Is that something that could be done?
Through the chair to Councillor Billingsley, there's always legal contracts that we can get signed to limit liability to the city. But whether or not we have our core does not determine whether or not we get sued.
No, what I'm wondering is if we said, okay, company, whatever company, electrical company that comes in, as a council, we've decided that we don't require them to have core CCorps. Could we then, any of these contractors sign off on this, they are prime? And then therefore we're
Responsibility. Julia might have to weigh in on this, but I believe you cannot assign prime contractor unless they are deemed competent to be prime contractor.
Yeah, you have due diligence when you have contractors come onto your site. So if you know that they either don't have their own program and haven't signed on to follow ours, then you haven't followed due diligence. And I can't say what would happen if anything happened and they went to court, but I know if OH&S came on site, it wouldn't be seen very favorably.
Councillor Branco?
Thank you. A couple questions. One, if we're following safety codes, government safety codes, do we not need to have an approved government safety codes operator to say these codes are wrong, or is it the city?
I can take that one through the chair to Councillor Branco. Safety codes is different than health and safety. So safety codes is regulated through the federal and provincial governments, and we contract that work out through the planning and engineering department to a safety codes company.
Thank you. My second question. Now, you had mentioned we're going to be hauling snow and some of these truckers don't have CCorps or core. Honestly, after all the argument, I want the city, anybody to work to have CCorps, but I also don't want to see people working who don't have CCorps. So 99% of our truckers hauling snow don't have CCorps. How are we going to get truckers to haul our snow if they don't have CCorps? Because if we have a policy, let's follow it. 100%. That means if he's got to pick up garbage, if he's got to cut trees, you better have CCorps, because you can't be prejudiced against one or the other. Either everybody has it or nobody has it. There's no in between.
Through the chair to Councillor Bronco, through our discussion was when I became aware of that. And so, like I said earlier, I haven't had a chance to sit down and brief Julia on how we're going to handle that, but it is something we're looking into. I didn't know we were doing that until you told us.
So that's the question. I just want a clear answer so everybody knows. You either work for the city, you must have CCorps, or you can work for the city if you don't have it. And I think that's something that's very important. We have to tell all of our contractors. It doesn't matter if you comply or not. You want to work for us, you have CCorps, go take your course, workman's compensation, which we all have, but you need CCorps in order to work for the city. You don't have it, don't drive your vehicles on our property to do work. For the city. It's got to be fair to everybody.
All right, anyone else? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Julia. Okay, the next piece was, there was a question about Vital Lake Park and specifically the state of the furniture and some of the things that are have not been maintained properly out at the park. And so I had been working with staff on a charter. This is just a draft charter that that I provided for you. And we were looking at a lot of different things. And so if you remember the recent review that we had done with our facilities, part of what we did was look at some of the furniture in and around the park. And there is some life left in some of the infrastructure, and some obviously is in really bad repair and needs to be looked at sooner than later. So we included that into the bigger charter because we feel that this is the premier park for the city, and that we have an opportunity out here to do a lot more. And we were hoping to do a design and then put in phases as to when we would get to each of these, and then allow council to approve over several years the upgrades out at the park. And so if you look on page 3, we do have the information on the picnic table replacements at 27,000. We did look at the gazebo and fence repairs and that sort of stuff, but the infrastructure that was in the email is being looked at and would be probably in year 1 of our request to get replaced sooner than later. There is some of the benches, I think what happened was we had just replaced the old wood struts with the new ones and they're sagging in a lot of areas. And if we actually put in some braces, we could probably rehabilitate some of the things that are out there. And then there are other pieces that absolutely need to be replaced. And so we just wanted to let you know, we're working on that plus a bigger piece out at Vital Lake Park, and then start to have discussions about, I guess, what Councillor Nielsen's concerns were specifically. And if we need to get to those sooner than later, Kathy's team could bring forward a charter to a subsequent council meeting and ask for that money ahead of time.
Any questions? Councillor Nielsen.
Under operation impacts on page 3, it's a dollar impact 0.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the mic.
On page 3, where it says dollar impact is 0, that's simply because we haven't assigned any dollars to it yet at this point?
Correct.
Okay.
Mayor Gandon.
On the replacement of the picnic tables, is that just getting rid of what we have and replacing it, or actually just building them with the supports underneath the table part of it? I was up there the other day and the benches, like the seating, had brackets underneath it that supported it, and those boards were nice and straight, but the ones underneath the actual table part didn't have any supports underneath. So if all we were doing is replacing those supports and the boards on top, whether it was the plank decking or wood or whatever we decided to do, but is that the cost to toss out the old ones, bring in new ones, or just repair the ones that we've got there?
Through the chair to Mayor Gandam, that cost is total remove and replace.
Okay. We would look at repair.
Those could be done in-house easily, yep.
Councillor Hillgartner.
Through the chair to Sue. Playground equipment replacement. What do we do with the old playground equipment? Do we auction it off, or can we auction it off because of liabilities? What happens with it?
Through the chair to Councillor Hillgartner, there are actual laws around the playground equipment, and once it reaches the end of its useful life, it has to be decommissioned.
So it has to be destroyed.
Yeah.
Basically.
Councillor Branco.
Thank you. I guess through Sue. So Sue, we're looking at about $2.1 million over years to repair our by the lake park. You add everything you got here, about $2.1 million. So are we preparing fundraiser to budget this? Not just because if we're going to be beautifying one of our most precious pieces of Wetaskiwin, is it worth it to do $100,000 this year, 100,000 next year, 100,000 years over? By the time we get to doing the bicycle path or the parking lot, what we replaced is already obsolete. So do we go in all at once and get 5-10 years worth of use, or are we going to keep going every year, do a piece? Because if we take 5 years to reconstruct our by the lake park, some of the playground equipment could be obsolete again.
Through the chair to Councillor Bronco, administration would recommend when we bring the charter forward that it is phased. It makes sense to go in and do the pond first and then work your way out from there. If a skate trail was approved, that would be the next piece, and then the bigger trail. So we have to build the pieces from in out. We would look at a constructability review and make sure that whatever we put forward to council for consideration had constructability as one of the key factors.
So this will be coming up for budget,
Yeah.
2022 budget.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Lonsdale.
Thank you. Through the chair to Sue. Going back to Mayor Gandam's picnic table question. I see we have 18 and we have a $27,000 replacement. Can you give me an idea what we'd be looking at as replacements? Would we be going with the same type we have now with the metal bases and then going with slats, or would we be going with treated wood?
Through the chair to Councillor Lonsdale, the team had based the replacements from Diamond Jubilee Park. So we would be looking at like powder coated metal benches and picnic tables moving forward so that they were had a longer life
Okay.
cycle.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Billingsley.
Possibly add to this, but after we did the spring cleanup, one of the comments we made from some of the people Sorry, and I was wondering if possibly we could add whatever those tall ashtray type of things into it as well.
Anyone else? Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next piece is the council priorities, and I just emailed it to you. I really apologize. We had some miscommunication on some of these things, so they didn't get published. The administration has gone through based on the priorities that council gave us in 2020. And item 1.1, so under improved safety and policing, 1.1 was develop a council and community action plan for the RCMP that was due by June 2021. And so that was the plan that Keith had brought forward. And that's what he's working off on that. So we are also calling this complete for this year. And then each year we'll get to review those and update them. 1.2, consider community education on police prioritization. So those 3 items that are in there were all done by the inspector and his team. And again, this is something that he does annually, so we'll make sure that it's updated each year. And then 1.3, review high crime area with impacted businesses and develop a plan to support those affected is still pending. We're doing some of the pre-work, I guess, on that right now with the RCMP, but a full review is slated for 2022, and some of this is linked into the Community Safety and Wellbeing Task Force. So getting some direction from that group as well. In section 2.1, we have pending, that's the Northeast development. So administration has a business case put in for the 2022 budget cycle to look at the environmental impacts of contamination in that area, and then we can report back once we get that done. 2.2 is in progress, so develop a plan to maximize growth opportunities for the airport. Currently looking at airport master plan in the budget for 2022, and then working with economic development on what can be attracted to the airport based on the reports that economic development has done. So they're working on that right now. 2.3 was market Wetaskiwin community through aggressive campaigns, including highway advertising and the use of radio and television. So that's in progress. Obviously, the brand launch tied into that. The awareness campaign, and they're leveraging the outdoor digital advertising. So that is ongoing and was reported, I believe, the last time Candace presented to council. 2.4 as well as in progress, so set target for increased economic development activities to include the number of active business licenses, construction value, and non-residential building permits. So they are in the progress of developing that plan and bringing that forward. Number 3 is recognize and welcome all members of the community. So the EDI task force was struck in 2020 and continues to work through. 3.1 was develop and implement an inclusivity action plan. Obviously, we haven't met the July 2021 deadline. And we were having trouble with the task force kind of going through that storming, norming, forming process as a team. And when Paul gets back, we've got a plan. We sat down with the chair and Paul, and we are going to bring back Wade, the facilitator that we had originally, to get us started, to try and get us focused more. And so that the group can actually focus on what initiatives need to be done. And then they'll be bringing forward a request for council through budget on what they think needs to be brought forward. And then looking at an inclusivity day, that was as well with the EDI task force, but it's something that they haven't started to plan, and they were thinking that they could look at that in 2022. So the next section was establish long-term plan for managing municipal financial resources. And ensure stability and service delivery. So 4.1, we have, well, most of them, I think we have on hold in this area. We are working on some of the pieces, so develop the asset management plan to dispose of unused assets. We're still inventorying a lot of our assets and looking at a land strategy. We've got the other piece in the next section about looking at the facilities. And so all of that kind of ties in. Once we get all of the assets actually documented, then we're going to be able to better develop out that the plan. 4.2, establish a plan for sustaining reserves, developing clear distinction between reserves for capital versus planning. So this one, we did do some of that work over the last year and have gotten some of the reports completed in the finance area. And under the direction of the new general manager there, he will be presenting some of those initiatives to council moving forward. And then set the tax rate goal for the next 3 years. This was a project charter that had gone in last year's budget, but was deferred by council to next year's budget. So it will be coming through in the 2022 budget deliberations. And number 5, the last part is be proactive in the acquisition, maintenance, and disposition of all capital assets. So 5.1 was to create that strategic plan for the key facilities. The RFP has been awarded. We've had the kickoff meeting. We did also include the extra building that was approved by council for the school that was offered by school board. And they are anticipating to have, they're currently going through all of their reviewing documents. They've been doing interviews with city staff and they're moving into the community interviews shortly, if they may have already. And then they're expecting to have the entire full report back by the end of October. So we will be able to report back to council then on that. And then all of the other initiatives in this area were put on hold for 2022 due to capacity of staff. So that is our update for this quarter. If there's any questions.
Carry on.
This is going a lot quicker than I thought it would. Okay, wastewater treatment plant continues to consume Kathy and my time. We were slightly delayed. The lawyers got called away on some other work and so haven't been able to work on our paperwork with respect to this. And so we're anticipating that we should have something presented to council, maybe that first October meeting, just with respect to what we would be presenting to the public. And then the second council meeting in October, when the new council gets sworn in, like we don't have enough else going on, would be the time that we would start talking about potentially advertising and starting the public hearing. We have to leave that open for a month once so that the community can review the financials, and if they have any questions, then they could get that addressed at the public hearing a month later. So we're looking at well into November before we can have a public hearing on standing up the MCC. And hopefully that works. Otherwise, it's probably going to end up being delayed until the new year, but we'd like to get that going sooner than later. So as the lawyers continue to work through some of the documentation, we will update you at our council meetings going forward. And then we plan to have that public hearing that late October, early November timeline. Yeah. I don't think there's really anything else with that one. Yep.
Are we going to be able to have this? Oh, sorry, I better get rid of this sheet. Are we going to be able to have that water treatment facility operation by our deadline, or if we keep having delays and delays, are we going to be able to meet the deadline?
Through the chair to Councilor Bronco, we may still be able to meet the deadline if we can get, we're looking at what early works we can let the contractor do. What we found is that as we started to dig into the numbers, they were including maintenance work that had already been planned. And so what we're proposing to bring forward, I said to them, it's a great idea, but this is still council's decision. So there's a much larger number being thrown around right now of close to 50 million. And that includes all of this other maintenance work. And so right now we've got the team breaking that out, saying, here's the wastewater treatment facility, but if council wants to be really proactive, they could do all this other work. And so we'll bring that back to you first to make that decision to say, no, go this way or go that way. And here's what the effects on the rate would be. So once we get through that piece, some of those pieces we can get going on right now so that won't delay the construction. And I am 98% certain that once we start construction, they will give us extensions past the 2023 if we need it. They just wanted to make sure that we were starting and that we were close to being finished around that time.
So my other question, we're not going to be on budget. We're not going to be on budget for what we estimated for this water treatment plant.
Sure, we will. We had estimated 40 million. The changes that we had done with the end of treatment or end of system treatment reduced the costs. But then what the team did, which wasn't really made clear when the financials were presented to us previously in camera, what wasn't made clear was that they started looking 10 years out, saying what pumps need to be replaced, what upgrades need to happen at Southeast, at Mosesson, at all these other places. And so they started adding all that stuff in, thinking, why wouldn't we do it all at the same time? And sure, normally if we were flush with reserves, that would be a great idea. But Kathy and I realized what they were doing, and we said, no, you need to break this out. So we really need to have a clear definition between this is what the wastewater treatment plant is costing us, and this is what the other pieces are costing us. And if you look at our 10-year capital plan that we have currently, we've got a couple $1 million a year set out for the next 10 years to handle all of those other pieces. So really what they're looking at is, do we front end all of that? Or do we just stick with the maintenance plan and continue that over the next, 10 or 15 years? So there is a benefit to going that way, but we wanted to make sure that that was council's decision. So if you look at that piece, it could be seen as over budget, but really I don't believe that it is, because we've budgeted for that already.
Councillor Nielsen?
Thank you. Through the chair, Sue. Thanks, Mom. But the data we were given and the numbers we were given projected some costs to the ratepayers in terms of the rates. So does this have an impact on those numbers then? So for example, if they're anticipating either us upfronting all those replacement maintenance costs or building it in, they didn't initially build it in when they gave us their rates. So are we seeing a different rate being expected of our ratepayers?
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen, when we started to dig in a little bit deeper with Grant Thornton on how they arrived at the numbers they did through the model, we were actually quite shocked at the escalation factors that were included in there. And it was based on all things being equal. I want to say a theoretical number. And so as we started to dig in a little bit deeper and refine the construction cost estimates, I think right now we're just beyond or right at the 30%. So as we continue to further define those construction cost estimates, they're able to get to a more accurate number. So what we've challenged them with is we're bringing on 30, 50, whatever that number is that council decides on, $1 million treatment plant, but how are we going to reduce rates? And so we've really started to challenge them to say, what can you do to cut back on, it's not going to be the Taj Mahal of wastewater treatment facilities, but it's got to be functional. So where's that midline that's going to help us? So what Kathy's been doing is going through the entire utilities budget and trying to find efficiencies and say, what is this for? Tell me exactly what you spent. She's looking at the historical and saying, okay, this is for that, or this was a double budget. So she's going through and actually trying to clean that up so that at the end of the day, even with this new stuff coming on, we're hoping for maybe a minor increase. In an ideal world, it would be no change, but in our in our hopes and dreams, there could potentially be some savings somewhere. So we're still reviewing all of those, but I do not anticipate that what was previously presented without a lot of detail is going to be the number that we're looking at. Not that big of an increase.
As we go down this road then, and those numbers change, what does that mean to us in the decision-making process?
So the Graham Aquaterra Group, they are challenged right now with getting us information so that we can present. I believe it was we're aiming for the early October or late October meeting to show council what the differences are. So they've gone through and separated out what the rates would be from A to B. And then they'll show you what, the cost benefit is of doing it now versus later. And based on grants, based on money that we have in reserves, based on what our existing rates are. So they'll present all of that information. As soon as we have it, we'll bring it to council, at least for information, so that you know.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lonsdale.
Thank you. Through the chair to Sue. Say things don't align and we haven't started construction by the date. Are the penalties set out already as to what penalties we are going to incur by not getting that done?
Through the chair to Councillor Lonsdale, the federal government has the ability to fine the city $4 million per violation. We only release twice a year. I think the federal government would have a really hard time. They would have a really hard time fining us because we're going down this road right now. But that possibility is always there.
Anyone else? Is that it for your?
It is.
May I ask a question?
As long as you turn your mic on.
Sorry.
As long as you turn your mic on.
Thanks. I'll do that. Because I wasn't going to again. So can you give us an update, and maybe this is unfair because I didn't throw it at you before now, but it just came to me. We had a young man that presented to us with regard to trying to access fire hydrants so he could open up a business and all that stuff. Do we have an update or status report on where we are with him getting fired up?
Absolutely.
Fired up, I meant started. I meant started in his business.
Kathy, do you want to take that one?
Through the chair to Councillor Nielsen. So I have been in contact with Mr. Baird and he is getting a bunch of information back to the city so that we could issue permits. And as far as the fire hydrant is concerned, he has to provide us a site plan of where he would like his buildings located so that we could assist him in locating either a Storts connection on his building or a fire hydrant that would be part of the city's infrastructure.
And so when he presents that material, what kind of turnaround goes back his way with those permits? Like, is it a 1 week process? Is it a 5 month? I'm being facetious, but what kind of a timeline would he expect to hear back from us?
If he provided us all the information that we've requested, I would suspect that within a 2 week turnaround, we would be able to issue the permits if we had all the information and we had the ability, I guess, with the fire hydrant and getting that installed and things like that.
Councillor Franco.
Thank you. Did I hear right that if we were to supply a fire hydrant to his property, that become city property infrastructure?
The fire hydrant would be on our property.
Okay, but we already have one on our property that's only 15, 20 feet away.
Yes, it just depends on where he wants to put the building on the site and depending on how that for fire response, where that would be located.
So the cost would be totally up to him, not up to us?
Correct.
Thank you.
Now, was that it for your update? Awesome. I need a motion to go into camera. Moved by Councillor Hillgartner. And I adjourn this.
Sue?